Is this, yeah, it's now unmuted. I almost want to start dancing like last night again. Same scene of the crime. Okay, so just, are we good to go? Yeah, great. Okay, hello everyone. Hope you had a good lunch. So now I think color is a really nice afternoon subject. It's one of my favorite subjects. I love color. But because I love it, then I've started realizing that actually maybe the way I see and feel and experience color may not be the same for everyone. So, first of all, what is color for? Why does color exist? What function does it have, if any? And it has a very basic primary function, both for human beings and for animals, because when we were out in the wild foraging, color is how we know which fruit to pick. We know whether something or a fruit or an animal, whether they're poisonous or whether they're good. It's how we can categorize and recognize things. It's how we differentiate things from one another. So color indicates function, basically, very simply put. It helps us identify objects and their function. So that's what color is used for in mapping, for instance. Maps are a very typical situation where color is incredibly helpful to create a reliable navigation. And the map, and then you can end up actually identifying things by the color. You know, you don't say the central line, you say the red line, or you can say that. This is a map of the London Underground, which is a very interesting piece of design, but that's a different story. So then color can also signify danger or alert, or yes, it's fine, you can go now. Color is basically everywhere, and it helps us navigate life. Then obviously navigate life as well as the web. So using color, we can create really complex navigational systems. Another place where you can see color used for navigation, for instance, is hospitals, where there's lines on the ground that take you to different areas of the building. Wherever there's a very complex navigational system, you can use color to help yourself around. But however, it's very easy to say color, but what actually is color? Where does it come from? How do we see it? Why do we see it? So the color of something is basically the way anything, any object reflects light in the physical world. So color, the term color is actually what refers to yellow, green, blue, pink, all the various hues of color that we'll see. So where does it come from, though? How do we see it? So it comes from a very, very, very tiny area of the electromagnetic spectrum. Now, I am not a scientist, so I'm a designer, so I'm going to limit this to what I understand. I understand this very clearly as the fact that the electromagnetic spectrum is basically the energy around us, is what the sun gives us, it's energy. So most of it we can't see. We can't see X-rays, we can't see ultraviolet, we can't see any of those other parts of the electromagnetic field. It doesn't mean that they're not useful for us. They're extremely useful for us. We just can't see them. The only parts that we can see is the part of the spectrum that's called visible light. And that's where color lives. And the spectrum goes from violet to deep red. So that's exactly how it works. So basically, it's called visible light because it literally is light. So color is light. Color does not exist without light. No light means no color, just as simple as that. So that's the essential thing to understand. However, how we perceive these wavelengths that make up color, it's a it's a combination of physiology and physics, because it's the way that the cones work in our eyes combined with the way objects reflect light. And when an object, and by objects I mean anything, you know, I mean also animals and plants and human beings and whatever. And the way an object is reflected is it's reflected. Light is reflected. Sorry, absorbed and scattered. It's a combination of all these things, and that results in the color that we see. One thing that never changes is that without light, there is no color, and no color is black. Now, the way it works for us on the web, it works like this. It works on the web. We use the RGB color model, which is also called additive color. In this color, the color in this color model, color is pure light. It's basically, it's not reflected, it's pure light. So that means that there is no reflection. So it's unlike, clearly it's a construct because it doesn't exist in the physical world. In the physical world, color is reflected in the actual physical world. So RGB stands for red, green, and blue, as I'm sure that we all know because we're professionals. And the reason why it's called additive color is that when the three colors overlap, what you get is the color white. So white is the sum of all colors, and black is absence of light. And the RGB color model is used wherever there's a screen. So whenever it's digital color, the color model is RGB. Now, the thing is that, I don't know about you, but when I started understanding about these things, it didn't make any sense at all to me that the sum of all colors would be white. It's just not normal, because when you start playing with color as a kid, when you mix the three colors, you don't get white. You get something completely different. So, in the physical world, the color model is called subtractive, and when the primary colors overlap, the result is black. It's not white. It will never happen. So, it's important also to remember that the primary colors in RGB are red, green, and blue, and in the subtractive model they're different colors. So this is the subtractive model used in the printing environment, where you can clearly see that when the colors are mixed together, they form black. They don't form white. So and also when they overlap, the results are completely different. Now, this is important, especially for those of us who have clients that have printed job as well as digital jobs, because it's, in my experience, it's always quite difficult to get a client to understand that what they see on the screen is not what they're going to see in print. Because obviously these are pigments, these are actual inks, they're pigments, and what they see on the screen is not a pigment, it's light, so it's going to have that sort of luminosity and brightness that you're never going to be able to reproduce in print. So, this is the subtractive model as refers to print, but also it's the same model that's used in art theory in general. Subtractive color, red, yellow, and blue, confusingly, because this is what these are the primary colors of the subtractive color model that's used in art theory. And basically, the theory of color is based on this. The primary colors, when we talk about color theory, are red, yellow, and blue, not red, green, and blue. And then the CMYK convention is simply a printing convention, where colors are separated in print, and then when they're juxtaposed, they form all the different colors. So again, if we see the difference between these two images, you can see that the same colors, when they're juxtaposed, result in something totally different. The result of two colors, one on top of the other, changes completely. So the units of measure of of RGB color, sorry, I'll say it again. RGB color has 256 levels of color for each of the channels. So it's from 0 to 255 for red, same for green, and same for blue. White is full light beams, every single color at its maximum power, and black is 0. Now, this is important to remind ourselves, because when we get to playing with all these colors, we see that we have loads. It's many, many, many colors. It's actually more colors than 16 million. It is more colors than our eye can actually see, because the human eye can kind of detect about 7 million, which is already quite a lot, but it's not as many. It's not as many as this. So it's actually too much choice, you know, in a way. So many colors and so little time to choose among them. So how do we do that? We're not going to have a look at color theory in any detail here, because it's an absolutely huge subject. But we're just going to have a look at some ways that work particularly well for the web to choose colors in a way that makes sense without getting lost or without choosing colors that could be problematic. And to do that, we go to the traditional lovely color wheel. So the color wheel is a circular diagram with a logically arranged sequence of colors. Now, it's said that the first physicist to come up with it was Sir Isaac Newton in 1666. That's what it said. Then many other iterations of the color wheel have been produced since then. And especially in Germany, there have been many other artists and scientists working with the color wheel and producing incredibly interesting theories of color, from Itten to Goethe to Albers, who's one of my favorites, because Albers is an artist who has worked with color all his life and has also very interestingly looked at how colors interact, so how we see a color in a different way according to what colors are playing with it around it. And it's fascinating how it works. And we don't have time to go into that now, but it's super interesting. So the color wheel is basically an essential tool to understand how colors are arranged, how they interact, how to choose color combinations, and why. So where to start? Now, the way you start is, first of all, like I said earlier, the actual color model for the color wheel is the red, yellow, and blue color model. So the primary colors are the red up there, then that blue there, and the yellow over there. By mixing them together, you get the secondary colors, and by mixing a primary and a secondary together, you get a tertiary color. So far, so good, quite simple. However, this obviously is a simplification, because it doesn't seem like this. It's a simplification. When you see it in the RGB model, there are 16 million of these colors as you go over the wheel. So what's interesting to look at, okay, sorry. Yeah, sorry about that. So the way we can play with colors is by playing with the basic color attributes. Now, each color has 3 basic attributes: hue, saturation, and brightness. Now, hue is simply another way of calling the color. Hue is yellow, blue, pink, green, whatever. That's a hue. Saturation is the intensity or purity of that color. I prefer to call it intensity, because if you say purity, it's as if you were mixing something else with it. Whereas I prefer to think of it as intensity. So if you take down intensity of a color, it does get closer to gray, but you're not actually mixing it with anything. You're just taking something away. You're taking its richness away. And then brightness. Brightness is simply the amount of light that's in a color. So this is where to start creating color palettes that work. It's from playing with hue, saturation, and brightness. Now, to understand clearly how the RGB color model, the HSB color model works, it's a three-dimensional model, and I'll explain how that works. So a hue, as we were saying, is simply a color of the rainbow. So a really good way of visualizing it is to place it on the color wheel. So each color, starting from the red at the top, is expressed in degrees. So saturation and brightness are expressed in numbers from 1 to 100, or sometimes as percentages. It's the same, more or less. Whereas hue, it's expressed in degrees because it's the position on the color wheel. You will see also, you will see representations of the HSB model as a cylinder because it is a three-dimensional model. However, I find my sort of designer brain finds it easy to visualize it like this. And I find it super useful because I know immediately by memorizing a few positions on the wheel, I immediately know where a color is. So it's I know that if it's got if I put 0 in a color creation or color palette creation tool, I know that it's going to give me a red if I go to 180. So I find it really useful to visualize it like this. So if we look at a tool like Photoshop, but it could be any tool, it's very useful to see how color is decomposed. So color is complicated. It's a really complicated element. When I think about design, I think of color as one of the elements that we play with, and it's super complex, but it's not that difficult to make it work for us. So as you can see, this is a kind of green, and it's 176, which works. If from the wheel that we've seen, it makes sense that they should sit at 176. The saturation specifically is 100, and the brightness, interestingly, is 50. And we'll see how that works. Then when we express it in the RGB model, that tells me that there's 0 red light, there's 128 levels of green light, and there's 120 of blue light. Now, there's also the hexadecimal color naming system where the first two digits refer to the red, I'm not going to go into an explanation on how that works because you probably know it, but however, the second 2 digits then refer to the green, and the third 2 digits refer to the blue. It's exactly the same color. Referring to a color with RGB or hexadecimal code is exactly the same. With RGB, of course, if we add the opacity, then we're able to play with the transparency of the color in web design. But however, the way we see it here, there's absolutely no difference. Then on the other side, it's CMYK, which is kind of almost completely arbitrary kind of translation, because the green that I see here would have probably no relation with the green that I obtain just by mixing those ink percentages, because printed color has so much to do with what support you print it on, the color of the paper, the intensity of the ink. It just depends on so many things. And the translation is basically kind of arbitrary. So just this is how hexadecimal color works. So clearly FFF is the full strength beam of the white, 6F, sorry, and it's just basically the same, another way of expressing the same color. Now, the reason why it's important to know how to create color palettes using the color attributes rather than using different colors is because people who have color vision issues have problems with hue. They don't have a problem with saturation or brightness. What's problematic to see for people with color vision anomalies is the hue. So if you play with saturation and brightness rather than playing with hues, you have a much higher chance of creating a color palette that will be accessible, and that's super, super important. So you can see, you can't see actually that clearly, which is kind of proves immediately one of my points, how color is really such a volatile concept, because in this room with this projector, this green color is almost invisible. If we because of the transparent nature of the projector, if we had less light, then these colors would be much more intense. So basically what I'm aiming at is that I really do think that color is an opinion, and we'll get to that. However, if you create a palette with saturation, it will be a very subtle palette, but it will be a palette that any user with any kind of color anomaly will be able to see. So here, starting from the left, it's 100% saturation, going down to a color that at the end, the one was this a little bit different. A tint is when you add black to a color, and a shade, sorry, the other way around. A tint is when you add white, and a shade is when you add black, which is not the same thing as taking brightness away or giving it more brightness. Clear so far, I take it? Make sense? Yeah? Okay, great. Now, we're just going to go back quickly to the wheel, just to have a look at, because there's no time in such a short talk to actually go over the wheel and color theory properly. But there's at least a couple of things that I want to touch on, which is complementary colors. So complementary colors are the colors that sit opposite to one another on the color wheel, and like most opposites, they attract. So when you build a palette using complementary colors, it's a really vibrant and strong palette. But you shouldn't create palettes with complementary colors unless you're really confident that you can pull it off, because they're also quite hard to do. And then you start seeing websites that use purple and orange and things like that, and it just doesn't, it's not good, doesn't work. And especially doesn't work for one specific reason. That is that when you use complementary colors in text combinations, it doesn't work, because it's a really strong vibration. And for instance, again, people with different types of vision impairments doesn't necessarily need to be a color vision impairment, because for instance, I'm astigmatic, and these things just drive me crazy. I can't, it actually vibrates, even in this sort of muted version with this kind of sort of low light. It vibrates to my eyes, and I just can't use it. So don't ever feel tempted, and if a client asks for it, just go, no, it's not possible, can't do it. And the worst one is definitely red and green. It's just not acceptable. So what this leads us to is that color really is an opinion, because how we perceive color is based on a series of variables that are very often beyond our control. Even the colors that we just saw, I am certain that the way I see them is different from the way you see them. Because to me, that red and green was particularly hurting my eyes, but maybe it was fine for you. And in the Facebook group that I mentioned, if people are, for the people who were in my earlier talks, there's been recently a debate, because I was on Monday, no, it wasn't Monday, it was Thursday, it was yesterday. I was on a Ryanair plane coming here, and Ryanair use this violent acid yellow in their branding, and you get on a plane first thing in the morning, it's like, it's like a punch in the eyes to me, coupled with blue, and it's almost complementary, and it just really, really hurts my eyes. So I posted something about that, and that sparked a huge debate on that. that again shows really clearly how color is physical, physiological, and environmental perception, as well as cultural perception, as well as personal perception, and really does also matter where you were born and what experiences you had. But basically, you cannot control how someone else is going to see a color. So that's why your color decisions cannot be based on a whim. And we'll see now clearly how color really is an opinion. So I'm sure that you've seen this dress. Anyone not seen it? I doubt it. Have you not seen it? It sparked a big debate on the web because someone posted this photo, and some people saying that it was a blue dress, and some other people saying it's a white and gold dress. So who says white and gold? Okay. Rest say blue. Yeah? Okay. Yeah. There's quite a few people who say white and gold, which to me is a bit crazy. I just don't, I never understood how it could even happen, how there could be this debate, because I was like, what do you mean? It's impossible, clearly. I mean, and it's very quickly resolved if you just take it into Photoshop and put, or any program that has an eyedropper that can tell you the percentages, you can easily prove that, which was done. It was one of those internet memes that sort of happened, but it was incredibly interesting to me because when I did this talk in Spain, more than half the room thought it was white and gold, which to me was absolutely extraordinary. I was like, it was a dark room, so it was a much clearer image. And I just don't get it. I don't get how you can't see that. Having said that, though, my brain, I've worked with color and images all my life, and I've done print and I've done web. I used to do art publications, so much time was spent making sure that the color that ended up on the printed page looked the same as the painting on the wall. There was, you know, and there were so many passages and there were so many variables, but I would literally have to go to the print by the side of the printing machine and with a reliable proof and tell them, can you please take, you know, a 1% of ink, not just the actual strength of the ink, because you can control that with a machine. So I have so many filters. I'm also a photographer, so I know how light works. I know how color works, and I've got so many filters. So I look at this photo, my brain immediately processes that this was probably a shop with very warm light, and I take that away. So I see the blue, I don't see the gold. Someone who doesn't have all those filters just see the impression, and the impression they have is white and gold. And the thing is, their opinion is as good as mine. It's not, I can't say, oh no, sorry, I'm right and you're wrong. If you see it white and gold, you see it white and gold. So that's it, you know, basically. So this is why it's incredibly important that as web professionals we choose color with not only with a reason, but in a way that people can, to make sure that people can actually see what we mean for them to see. Another really interesting one is this one. What colors? Anyone see white here? Anyone see a white jacket? A blue jacket. Wow. It blows me away. It always blows me away. To me, this is brown and black. No hesitation. It's extraordinary, extraordinary. To me, it's just, it fascinates me. I love it, because to me, that's brown and black, and that's it. And anyone see brown and black? Good. Okay, I feel less alone now. So, again, another demonstration that there is no, to me, this is a done deal. I don't even consider, it looks much darker on the computer screen here, but I wouldn't dream of thinking, oh, someone may see something different here. I just wouldn't, you know. So you never know what can happen. So color can't be chosen on a whim, full stop. there always needs to be careful consideration behind it, and we must make sure that our colors are accessible. That's why forget about using complementary colors, color palettes, use saturation, use brightness in your UI. Look at how the really big sites with the big money behind it do it, and you'll see that that's what they do. They just, generally, that's how it's done. And also accessibility is actually a legal requirement as well. Also, let's see, many people have no idea that they have a form of color blindness, and it's 80% of men, which is quite a few. It's very few women, it's only 0.5%. And actually, after giving this talk somewhere else in Spain, I was fascinated to discover that a lot of color vision deficiencies are actually transmitted via the mother who doesn't suffer from them. So it's a whole world of interesting stuff. So here are different types of color blindness. Does anyone here know that they're colorblind? Do you know if you have a, yeah? What color blindness problem have you got? Red green, that's the, it's the most common one, and it's the one, it's protanopia, I think. Yeah, I think it's protanopia, and it's completely, it is rather common, but we found out, my brother has it, we found out because of a tie that he was insisting on wearing, which is completely wrong with a suit. It was like, yeah, but it's brown, it's fine. We're like, no, it's bright red. How do you not see that? And we hadn't noticed. We didn't know. So there are a series of tools. These days, it's quite easy. Now, this enchroma.com, I'm going to try. I don't know if I can actually go on the web here. No. Don't know why it's... Oh, because I'm clicking on the wrong one. I must click on this one. This enchroma... No, there is no internet connection. Sorry? I'm going to try, because I did connect yesterday, so it should work. Let's see. Oh. Does anyone have it? It was out there. I mean, it's not... Ah, great. It's 5W F G H. I'm wondering whether that H was actually capital.
Yes, it's capital.
Oh dear.
3 T.
2, 3
J.
T, probably capital.
Yes.
J.
And 4 2.
4 2. Fingers crossed. Sorry, guys. Maybe. I'll refresh. I can't find my mouse. Where is it? Okay, here and here. So it's a different, okay, so that works. It's a different resolution, so I don't know how to actually fit the window, but maybe if I do this. No. Oops. What happened? Sorry. Botching it up slightly. We'll get there. So this Enchroma website, I'll just refresh again if I manage. Whoopsies. Sorry. This Enchroma website is just simply, it's actually, they're trying to sell you glasses that correct color blindness issues. It's difficult to show you what it does, but basically it's a really fun test to do that you can do to see whether you have a color blindness or not. And I really recommend running it because you may not know that you have a type of color blindness, because there are many, and they in varying degrees of subtlety. So it's really interesting to find out if you have it. Now I'm going to try and go back to the presentation and not do a crap job like I just did with that. So, hey, good. So, the other web tool that I love is coolers.co. Does anyone know it? Yeah? Not that many people know it. So it's a, I'm not gonna, it's really, it's not quite working with this because I can try, but the web page won't show properly. And also I keep losing my mouse. So it's a color palette generator where you can, I'm gonna try at least go to it. So it's where I store all of my clients' color palettes and my projects and so on. And wouldn't it be great to be able to access it? I think I'm gonna not do it because I just can't. It's too awkward. So not only can you have all the, you can generate color palettes, you have them all here. I'll show you this one, for instance. But it also comes with an inbuilt series of tools that allow you to check for, it's here, for color blindness. So you can check here whether your choice works or not. And normally, the way it works is that I now know to choose colors that have a very different brightness value, and it's got nothing to do with a hue. So I know that sometimes I choose colors that in hue have a really big contrast. So you can really see that the hues, even, you know, they're very bold together. But when I run through the checker, through coolers or other checkers, there's a chroma extension as well to check for color blindness issues. Then I see that they don't work because once you take the hue away, the brightness is more and saturation are more or less the same, so they look exactly the same. So, which for instance happens with this palette, which I had here, but we just can't see it, it's too big. And then also another thing that Coolers does, it allows you, I've lost the mouse again. Okay, so it allows you to play also with alternative, with shades and tints. So again, super easy to build a palette just with coolers, just with one hue. And what it also does is it has the adjust tool, which was this one. So you don't even need to leave colors to play with the brightness. Who needs Photoshop? You just got it all here, and it's free, and it's an amazing tool. And you can either lock a color and create a palette based on that color. You can just freeform, just keep pressing the space bar, and it does that for you. So it's a great, 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 great tool. It's this way. Right. Yeah.
Why am I only allowed to create a color palette with 5 or fewer colors on coolers? Is there a reason why 5 is the maximum number?
Oh wow, 5 is too many colors in a palette normally. It's a good question. I don't have a straight answer for that. I don't know. I would say that I wouldn't have a palette with more than. Why would you want more than 5 colors?
So it might be that part of the answer is that I was thinking of different shades and tints.
Yeah.
As different colors, but maybe if I think of, you know, the 5 as a base set with variants, then that makes more sense.
Yeah, because coolers is for the hues. Basically, coolers is not the only palette generator out there. It's just my favorite one, but because it's just the user experience is great. It's super simple. It has everything I need, and I love it. And it allows me to store everything, and I can. Oh, and it creates PDF, CSS, everything. I mean, it's just extraordinary what it does for free. But it plays with hues. It allows you, what you can do, because obviously when you create a, I'm just going to be so challenged again with this, because I can't, okay. So each of these is obviously, it has the RGB and hexadecimal equivalent. So, but you have it all there. You can just play with that, safe in the knowledge that you're not changing the hue. But what so within that you can do that, and you can build sub palettes with the brightness and the saturation, but I would never recommend having more than 5 colors. So usually I have like maybe 3, although I use colors a hell of a lot because I am quite confident with it. It's one of my forte. It's a bit of an instinct with me as well. So I'm confident with that, but I know that then in the end when I apply it, I have to apply it with a grain of salt, as they say, because otherwise you run into problems. And especially because, like I said, I may think that to me 2 colors are very different from one another, but maybe they're not. So, I go back to the presentation how I did earlier. The thing is that the next slide is again a website that's called toptab.com, which is again it's a website where you simply put the URL of the website you're working on, and you can put it through a filter that will show you whether your interface is visible to people with color blindness problems or not. So another super useful tool that we have. And then the last one is Colorblind Dalton, which is actually a Chrome extension. And you can use that. I tend to do it beforehand with coolers, so I haven't really used it much, but it's actually quite fun to just apply it to things and see what comes out. Then another really important thing to take into consideration is contrast. And I am going to try and go to this website because no, sorry, I've done it again. This is where I need to be. So, another really, and this is really difficult to show. I just don't know. I just don't know how to do it. Anyway, so the other color consideration that we must bear in mind is contrast. Colorable, it's not the only color contrast tool that we can use, but it's a tool that allows you to interactively experiment with the color that you want to use for your backgrounds and the color that you want to use for your text at the various web standards. And it gives you the contrast ratio result, and it tells you whether that's accessible or not and whether that is consistent with web standards. And it's quite an important one, this one. It's a minefield. The contrast thing is a complete minefield because even though for accessibility reasons, for instance, people with dyslexia, you shouldn't use too harsh a contrast. For instance, in my presentations, I used the yellow and the blue and the white, but the white is actually gray, and I've toned down the blue a lot so that the contrast isn't excessive. But then someone with other problems, they actually do want more contrast. Like, you know, it's always said that white text on black shouldn't, you shouldn't do that, and same thing the other way around, black on white you should never do. But then that's only for certain types of eye vision problem. So the contrasting is a real minefield. So if you use web standards, then you're kind of safe. The chances are that there will always be someone that you haven't made completely happy, but at least you know you know that you're safe. And it would have been nice to actually do a demonstration, but I can't do it because I can't adjust the resolution of that. So back to where we were. So this is the whole point of this, is that color, fascinating, infinite, more than 16 million, but it's an opinion, and you need to use it with a grain of salt to make sure that everybody can enjoy the colors that you use as they're meant to. And above all, curb the clients when they want you to use 1,000 different colors that don't work together. So, again, this is designforgeeks.com. That's a project I'm working on at the moment, which is designed for geeks. And there's a Facebook group as well, which I'd love for you to join if this is the kind of thing that you're interested in. So that's it.